Hello everyone, this is Pooka and welcome to another edition of Building on a Budget, where we take inexpensive ways to build competitive decks for new players trying to get into the Pokemon TCG without breaking the bank. Now today's deck is going to be very unconventional, but it's a lot of fun, it's actually fairly competitive, and it'll help you learn the game quite a bit. And it makes you do a lot of math, which can be good and bad, but I think this is a deck that's really cool for beginning players, and again, it's just super fun to use. So this is going to be a Flareon Cofagrigus deck. Basically, these are just the two main Pokemon of the deck. The first one is Flareon. I've actually used this one in a deck, on a budget deck already. It's a perfect card for budget decks because it is an uncommon card, which makes it very cheap, and it has a nice type, Fire, which hits a lot of popular cards for weakness, but it has a strong attack as well in Vengeance. So Vengeance does 20 plus 10 for each Pokemon in your discard pile. Pretty simple. You want to get a lot of Pokemon in your discard pile very quickly so that Vengeance can do lots of damage. That's going to be the idea of the deck. Now, how do we do that? We got a lot of different ways to do that, but number one is going to be this Cofagrigus. It has this ability 6 feet under, where you can knock yourself out. That seems very bad, but it does have a purpose. First of all, it puts itself into the discard pile so that Flareon can use Vengeance for more damage, but it also can put 3 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon when you do that. So it works out very, very well. Sure, you give up prizes, but this deck is just going to be kind of like a crash and burn kind of deck. You want to win quickly, otherwise you're probably going to lose. So we want the game to be very, very fast with this deck. 6 feet under is a very unique ability, being able to knock yourself out and putting damage on your opponent's Pokemon. It is a definite negative that you give up a prize, but there are certainly lots of ways to take advantage of that. So these are the main 2 Pokemon of the deck. Now we also have a cool little Pokemon here, Ditto. So its ability Transform allows you to put a basic on top of it. So this can be good for a couple different things. Number one, if you transform Ditto into this Yamask, and then evolve into Cofagrigus, when we use 6 feet under, a Ditto also goes to the discard pile, so we get 3 Pokemon in the discard pile for Flareon's Vengeance instead of 2. So that's really cool. This can also just turn into any of your other Pokemon. So it can transform into an Eevee, which can then evolve into Flareon, or it can transform into our other Pokemon, Vulpix, which can turn into Ninetales. Now we just run a 1/1 Ninetales line. We're just using it for its ability Bright Look. When you play it to evolve your Vulpix, you get to switch one of your opponent's benched Pokemon with the active Pokemon. So you get to drag something off the bench. This is very good for picking off one final Pokemon EX or something like that to get one last big knockout. So it's really cool to have in your deck. Just kind of a versatile thing. We're trying to run as many Pokemon as possible. We have 28 Pokemon. That's so we can use Vengeance for as much damage as possible. We also have 3 Audino, has the ability Busybody. If your active Pokemon has damage or a special condition on it, you can use Busybody, discard Audino, remove 10 damage, and also a special condition. This is really cool, just another way to get Pokemon in the discard pile. And it's awesome to get rid of special conditions as well. Now, we do have a Pokemon EX in this deck, which makes it a little pricier than the other decks we've built so far. But Jirachi EX is probably $5 at most. It has this ability, Stellar Guidance. When you play it, you get to search for a supporter card. So in a lot of decks, we would just run lots of supporter cards to help us draw cards. But again, we want Pokemon in this deck. And we run 4 Jirachi EX because we need Pokemon. And we run a lot of ways to search for it. So all we have to do is run 8 supporter cards now, and we can constantly search for them if we need to with Stellar Guidance. And if you don't, you just discard the extra Jirachi for Flareon's Vengeance. So this deck has a lot of synergy. It's a very, very cool deck, I think. And it's also very consistent, so it's an awesome deck to try out. For the trainer cards, again, we have lots of searching cards. 4 Level Ball. This allows us to search for a Pokemon with 90 HP or less. 4 Team Plasma Ball. We can search for Team Plasma Pokemon. Flareon and Cofagrigus fit the bill here. And then 4 Ultra Ball, which is an awesome card in this deck. Not only do you get to discard 2 cards, which means we can discard 2 Pokemon, but we can search for a Pokemon as well. So it looks like we're only running 8 supporters. We have 4 Professor Sycamore, discard your hand and draw 7, and then 4 N, each player shuffles in, and then draws a card for each remaining prize card. But with 4 N, 4 Sycamore, 4 Jirachi, 4 Level Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, it's almost like we run 20 ways to find supporters. So this deck remains very consistent, even though we're only running 8 supporter cards. Now, N is very strong in this deck, because we can combine this with Cofagrigus' 6 feet under. When we knock ourselves out, our opponent takes a prize. So let's say on the second turn of the game, we use 2 Cofagrigus, give our opponent 2 prizes. And then in the second turn, we can play an N already to put our opponent at 4 cards in hand. It's a very, very powerful concept, giving your opponent prizes just to disrupt their hand. And, you know, we can only really attack with Flareon, so we don't mind giving up those prizes, since we want the game to end very quickly. Now, we also do run Computer Search as the Ace-Spec card. Unfortunately, for some reason, this happens to be the most expensive Ace-Spec card, but it's very good in this deck. You can discard 2 cards from your hand and then search for any card. Again, it's an extra way to discard cards, and it can search for anything, which makes it awesome. An alternative to this card may be Life Dew, which, when your Pokemon gets knocked out, you give up 1 less prize card. This has great synergy with Cofagrigus, since it gives up no prizes when you use 6 feet under. But I'm going to go with a more consistent Computer Search. If you want to save a little bit of money on this deck, you could go with the card Life Dew instead. For the other trainer cards, we have 2 Silver Bangle. This allows us to hit those Pokemon EX for knockouts early on. You'll be surprised how much damage we can do very quickly. And Silver Bangle helps us get those one-hit knockouts on big Pokemon. And then we have 2 Silver Mirror as well. Team Plasma Pokemon are very popular, such as Lugia EX, Thundurus EX, Genesect EX, the list goes on. And Silver Mirror stops them dead in their tracks. It is especially strong in this deck, because we can, again, use Cofagrigus early on, use an N to put our opponent at a low hand size, and then it's very difficult for our opponent to draw into the resources to get rid of this Silver Mirror and also knock out Flareon. So Silver Mirror is very, very good in this deck. We also have 2 Tool Scrapper, since, number 1, we are affected by Silver Mirror ourselves, because Flareon is a Team Plasma Pokemon, but this is also for things like Garbodor's Garbotoxin, which can shut off our abilities, and it's very annoying. So Tool Scrapper, we run 2 of these in this deck, a very good card to have as well. And then we just have 1 switching card, and Escape Rope forces both players to switch out their active Pokemon. So this deck is really fun, again, really cool, I love it. It looks like it's skipping in a lot of areas, but it's just a very simple, straight-to-the-point kind of deck. And our only energy is 4 double colorless energy. That is it. So be careful with your energy in this deck. It's very precious, but you should only really need 4 in most cases, since if they knock out all 4 of your Flareon, you have lost the game. So that's really all there is to it. So alright, let's see this cool deck in action. Of course, I did play a game with it on Pokemon TCG Online. So let's see if this Flareon Cofagrigus deck can set up and go wild with Vengeance and 6 feet under. Looks like my opponent will be going first, and oh no, we're starting with a Jirachi. Not the greatest starter in the world, but we're going to have to deal with it. If we ignore the Jirachi start, this is actually a very good hand. 2 Level Ball can get us some basics. We got an Ultra Ball to get another basic. So this is very good. We need to explode on the first turn and get lots of basic Pokemon in play. Lots of Yamask and Eevee and Ditto. Those are the things we want in play on the first turn. And there we go. There's an Eevee. We got a Level Ball. I'm going to try to get at least 2 Yamask on the field this turn. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll Level Ball for another one. Get that onto the bench. This is really all I wanted this turn. I wanted 1 Eevee and 2 Yamask. That way we could use 6 feet under twice on the second turn and really start to put on some pressure. I could get a Ditto there. That might have been okay. But I think I'm just going to settle on the 2 Yamask and maybe just play the N here. I could Ultra Ball away a Cofagrigus and a Team Plasma Ball, but that's okay. We'll just settle for this. Play the N, get a Ditto down on the bench as well, and then pass the turn. Now, what will my opponent do here? Looks like we're up against a Fairy deck. This is a deck that's gained a lot of popularity lately. It's just things like Thundurus EX, Genesect EX, perhaps Landorus EX, and Yveltal EX. Looks like this one revolves around a lot of safeguard Pokemon like Sigilyph and Suicune, so we may not have too much trouble with this kind of a deck, although 1 prize attackers do slow down this deck a little bit. We like to be taking our prizes in chunks. We want to be taking 2 at a time, if possible. We actually prefer to face Pokemon EX with a deck like this. But let's see what happens. We see an Ultra Ball. And what's going to come out here? We see a Genesect EX. That's a very scary card because Red Signal can pick off our Pokemon on the bench. But it is weak to fire, so if it ever happens to come active, I'm not too concerned. We see Spritzy retreating the Prism Energy away. That's okay because my opponent can simply use Raiden Knuckle with Thundurus EX to get that back and get that energy back into play and then start moving energy around with Aromatis's Fairy Transfer. And it does look like this deck revolves around Palkia EX and then those Safeguard Pokemon in order to just strafe and switch into them. This is good against most decks that run Pokemon EX, but it probably won't be a very good strategy against this kind of a deck. Now, turn 2 here, we're going to get a double Cofagrigus into play. We'll go ahead and Ultra Ball for a second one of those, discarding a Jirachi EX. I already have the Sycamore in hand, so not a big deal. We'll evolve to Flareon and then draw 7 cards right there. Alright, so what else are we going to do? I'm just going to bench another Ditto. I could have transformed my Ditto into a Ditto and then transform into something else. If Dittoception. But I think we'll just bench another Ditto and leave it at that. I'm just going to attach to the benched Flareon and then pass the turn. That Jirachi start is preventing me from really doing anything right here, but I'm okay with that. Next turn, we should be able to get a very explosive turn. There's no reason to use 6 feet under right now because I can't attack. And my opponent could play things like Max Potion, which would be very annoying. So I am just going to sit back and wait for my opponent to do something. Or at least until next turn where I can simply retreat into Jirachi and go from there. Or retreat the Jirachi into Flareon and go from there. My opponent is deciding to be very aggressive here, using a Red Signal to bring out the Flareon, thinking, oh, we don't want to see that at all. We want that thing knocked out right now. And we see the Fairy Garden, so this will allow my opponent to retreat, Fairy Transfer to the Genesect EX, and Megalo Cannon for the knockout if he wishes. Now this might seem like a good move, taking out my Flareon. Doesn't look like my board is very threatening. But if you see my hand, you know what's in store. If my opponent decides to take the knockout here, we have a Level Ball for an Eevee, and then we can transform Ditto into Eevee and immediately evolve into Flareon, and probably Vengeance for the knockout on this Genesect right now. And looks like that's what's going to happen. And right here, you'll see why this deck can be kind of cool. So it looks like we have nothing in play. But check this out. We're going to Level Ball for Eevee, use Ditto to transform Eevee, and then I'm just going to grab like another Cofagrigus to discard to get another Pokemon in the discard pile. Since we're going to evolve to Flareon, drop that double colorless energy, and we can computer search right here for an N. That seems like the right thing to do. Since we're going to use both Cofagrigus, 6 feet under, discard both, give my opponent 2 prizes, and then put my opponent down to 3 cards with the N. So here we go. 6 feet under. I don't even need to put any damage on the Genesect EX. Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 Pokemon in the discard pile. After I use both Cofagrigus, I'll have 8 Pokemon in the discard pile. Meaning Vengeance does 100, meaning it does 200 to Genesect. Now normally I like to plan ahead to see where my 6 feet under damage is supposed to go. I think 30 is going to go straight onto that Thundurus EX, since I figure that'll be attacking me next. But I'll probably be able to knock it out next turn with a Silver Bangle or by discarding 3 more Pokemon. So we'll put the other 30 on a Palkia EX that may be used to stall in the active spot. we may have to knock that out at some point. So using that 6 feet under damage efficiently is pretty important. We do get an N for 6, and I get a Silver Mirror, which is going to be very good against this deck, since it seems like there's a lot of Team Plasma Pokemon, and we got the Vengeance for 200 on that Genesect EX, taking him down. Now, if that were a Pokemon not weak to fire, I simply would have used the 6 feet under damage on the active Pokemon, and then tried to go, try to discard a couple more Pokemon there to get a knockout. But it just worked out right there that we were able to knock out that Genesect EX. But you can see how explosive we are right there, being able to knock out a big EX this quickly in the game. And our prizes are kind of laid out for us from here. We do see a Skyla for a Tool Scrapper, so my opponent deciding need to get rid of that Silver Mirror. And we see the Raid Knuckle for 30. And that will get an energy onto the benched Palkia EX. Now I can just use Dino's Busybody here twice. This heals 20 damage, and then also gets 2 more Pokemon in the discard pile. That's pretty cool if you ask me. And we'll go ahead and grab a Level Ball. I can either take Eevee or we can grab Vulpix to set up for a Bright Look next turn. I think I'm going to do that. So go ahead and get Vulpix. We can Stellar Guidance for a Sycamore here. Discard the Yamask and the Cofagrigus. I could use those, but it doesn't seem like that's really worth it at this point. And we'll go ahead and transform a Ditto into an Eevee. Drop another double colorless energy. And now we can Vengeance 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 Pokemon in the discard pile for a mighty 140 damage of Vengeance. And we already have that damage there from 6 feet under. So Thundurus EX is going down. And my opponent just doesn't have much energy to respond. And we see a Darkrai EX. No matter what comes up, I don't think my opponent will be able to stop the next Vengeance for a knockout. And yeah, just to pass, that N put on so much pressure. And here we should be able to take the win. Let's see how much we can do. That's Ultra Ball, or Team Plasma Ball for a Flareon. I should be able to get the win this turn. Well, Ultra Ball for a Ditto. Get that into my hand. And then Ultra Ball, discard the Ditto. We'll grab another Pokemon to discard. Getting rid of Ditto and DC. We'll take the Jirachi, since we can just discard that. And we will use Bright Look to bring out the Palkia EX. Put a Silver Bangle on the active. Sycamore for a fresh 7. Busybody. And look at this. Vengeance for 220 damage. What was this, like turn 5? We just used Vengeance for 220? That is ridiculous. And 3 straight attacks, 3 straight knockouts on Pokemon EX. And Flareon Cofagrigus is going to pick up the game right here. So you can see this is just kind of a snowball effect. Once you start attacking, you start doing tons of damage. Your opponent has very little time to deal with Flareon. A very small window to respond. If they don't, you're just going to run them over with Vengeance. So this deck is a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will certainly have some more for you soon. I am Pooka from the Top Cut, and I'll see you guys next time.